So welcome to M&A Unpacked, another episode. And today I'm joined by Kevin O'Loughlin, who is the CEO of Nostra, and Michael Murphy, who heads up M&A at Nostra. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
All right. Great to see you, Mike. You're looking well.
You too. I love the room. You guys got a great high def camera. You guys are definitely outdoing me. So, which is great. Love to see.
Very important in a technology company to have good technology.
Yeah, 100%. That is a good point. Well, why don't you guys take a minute to, just introduce yourselves to everybody?
Yeah, well, look, I'm Kevin O'Loughlin. We founded this business back in 2006. So we're, 19 years operational today. We started doing M&A in 2015. We've completed 10 transactions since then. We're a business today, about 400 people, 50 million in revenue for 2024. So the year just completed. And our objective is near term, so the next kind of 4 years, to get to 250 million euros in revenue, to keep our mix similar and really to expand geography and product set. So yeah, we're on a fun journey.
Awesome. Michael?
Michael Murphy, I'm the commercial director with Nostra, and as you said, Mike, I lead up M&A. I'm with the business a little over 2 years. I joined back in 2022 as an interim CFO. I was only going to be here for 6 months, but stopped getting from crying on my way out the door. I agreed to stay on for a little bit longer and run the M&A side of things. So yeah, it's a really interesting business to be part of.
Michael was a bit like the guy from Wolf of Wall Street. He took the mic and started shouting, he's not leaving, so he's still here.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, let's kind of start a little bit and dive into that background. Obviously, you said you launched Nostra back in 2006 in Dublin, where you guys were an early adopter of cloud and Microsoft services. What sparked that vision, and how has the business evolved since then?
So what sparked the vision was quite straightforward. So I was an engineer back 26, 27 years ago. So I understood the technology, and back in the days of Windows NT Server, and I would have been through the Windows 2000 transition, Windows Server 2000, and kind of that Active Directory journey. I suppose in the mid-noughties, so around 2003, 2004, 2005, virtualization started coming into the market, and not necessarily coming into our market, but the product started arriving out there. And I really didn't like the concept of continuing to sell loads of individual servers when it was no longer technically required. And ultimately, I left the business to start Nostra to do virtualization. So instead of selling 10 servers to a company, we could sell them one server to do the same job. And that was kind of the initial viewpoint, but they were big, expensive projects. Companies at that point would have been spending 150 grand on a single virtualization project. And in 2008, obviously the global financial crisis kicked in. People tightened up their budgets. And Microsoft at that time was launching a product called HMC 4.5. So the techies on the call might remember that. But ultimately, HMC 4.5 was what Office 365 is today. But the concept was an IT company or an MSP would buy the platform, run it on their own server infrastructure, and then rather than selling their servers to customers, they would sell mailboxes to customers, and then all their customers would be on your tin. Nobody bought it globally except us and a couple of others. So it was us, a company in Sweden bought it in Europe, and a couple of businesses in the US. And Microsoft decided to launch it directly themselves a year later. And at the end of the day, Nostra comes from Nostradamus, seeing into the future. And our view was it was the right thing. It was cheaper and better and less margin, which is important to note, but less margin, because instead of selling a 10 grand server, you're selling 1,000 euros or 1,000 a year potentially office license cost. So like we were going into companies who had 15 mailboxes and selling them a 10 grand server, And now we're going into a company with 15 mailboxes and we're charging them like, 90 euros a month with a 12 or 15 euros margin. But it was the right thing to do. So we cannibalized our own client base. So all the servers we had, we stopped selling. We haven't sold an email server since 2008. And effectively, we were going into companies, winning on Office 365 and then bringing in the full suite of products. So yeah, we were early adopters, and our whole model has always been very early, get in early, adopt new technology where the technology makes sense, and don't be afraid to cannibalize our own business, because better we cannibalize it than somebody else.
And you had as you said, your first acquisition was in 2015. And I know it came about almost by accident. Can you walk us through that first acquisition, how the deal came together and what you guys learned from it?
Yeah, well, I'd love to sit here and say we strategically sat down at the boardroom and we decided to raise a ton of capital and, go out and identify all the different probabilities in the market. The reality is we became an accidental M&A company. We hired a person who came into us from our first acquisition, but the individual came in and he rang all his old customers on his first day. And I got a call from the chief executive and we met for a coffee, and he thought I had instructed him to do this, which I hadn't. So I said, look, absolutely, totally agree. Same happened to me. I'd be very upset. So, I'll make sure that none of those come to fruition. If any of the customers are really upset, I will come back and I'll tell you. And we won't take any of them. We won't sign any of them. And we will engage and unravel from this very quickly. So there's only a day's damage. And the next day he rang me and said, look, you seem to like this whole IT thing. I don't. Would you have any interest in buying my business? And I said, well, I have no money, and so I'm not in a position to do so. But he said, well, what if we looked at a financing deal where we can put it together to you as a package and we'll finance it for you. We sat down, we looked, we effectively did a deal over a weekend, and we took on his team and his business, and it became a phenomenally successful acquisition. With, when I say zero due diligence, it's probably unfair. We looked at the customers, we looked at what they were paying. We knew some of them, we knew some of the engineers, so we did a really light due diligence. But ultimately, we had a huge amount of work. One of their smallest customers became one of our biggest customers very quickly, because they realized all the capability that we had, and they were paying them, I'm going to say, 6,000 or 7,000 a year, and they started paying us within a couple of months, a couple of 100,000 a year. So we had some massive upside in the clients, huge efficiency improvements across the engineering teams, in that they were answering phones, taking in deliveries, and all these other things, which they didn't need to do when we acquired them. And all of a sudden, we had a ton of engineering capacity back. And, the two companies together were both quite small. We were probably 2 million, they were probably 1 million, so combined 3. But the difference was we bought a business that was effectively break even, and we doubled our profitability within a couple of weeks. And we really got to see the value and energy that you can do by bringing new energy to a client base, but also the team that come in through an acquisition get great potential and opportunities within a larger company. The team that we had got really excited about doing an acquisition, working on it. So like, everyone loved it, and it just became a thing. We're going, this is unbelievable, we should do more of it. But because we were an accidental organization doing it, it took us 3 years to get to our second deal.
So from the first deal to now, you guys have completed 10 acquisitions. What systems, strategies have you put in place to scale your M&A efforts so effectively, especially, doing 5 deals in 2023 alone? It's a lot.
Yeah, well, I'll let Michael talk about the latter part of it. But in the earlier stages, if I go back to 2018, we did our second deal. And the catalyst of it was we had a pretty large customer, I'd say a third of our revenue, great business, right? And a great customer, but they were a third of our revenue, but 100% of the leadership team's headspace. it was such a big customer, proportionate to everyone else, that were giving us probably €2 million a year in revenue. And it became a beast of an organization, and one which we probably weren't big enough at that time to manage at the scale that they needed. We didn't have we were scaling so fast as a business, we didn't have our proper processes and procedures in place. And in early 2018, they informed us they were exiting after 8 years of being a client. And that was a big punch to the stomach, right? But in reality, it made us a much better business, and it forced us to kind of look and say, well, how do we replace that revenue? And then we're like, look, we did this M&A thing 3 years ago. It was brilliant. So why don't we do more M&A and try and buy a business of similar scale to what we're after losing as a customer? We went to market, we found a company, we acquired it. That worked okay, wasn't our best deal, but then 2 years later, we decided we'd go again, and again, learning the lessons of the first 2 deals that we'd done. And then we got a superb organization. We bought a business called Brandon Global, and Gary Melvin, as an example, heads up our security. He was running that business at the time, and the original founder exited, and he had stepped back from the business as an operational person prior to that. And effectively, we then had a bit of momentum around how to do it well. We did it through bank debt. We did it through using our own profitability. And then in 2021, we did another deal, which was interestingly a business that the third company we were trying to buy was trying to buy the fourth company that we bought, if that makes sense. And that deal didn't happen. So then when we did our deal, as part of our due diligence, we were made aware of an acquisition they had been looking at. And we decided to proceed and look at that. We bought that fourth business. And again, that really drove us forward, because all of a sudden we bought 7 or 8 million. We were kind of 6 or 7 organically. And we were up at 20 million in revenue. And at that point, we said, right, we'll take a year, which we did in 2022, to really get the business, kind of all the companies integrated, get everything up and running. And then in January 2023, Michael comes into the business, and we decided this is something we want to do quite seriously. And Michael might talk you through 2023.
Yeah, I guess, Mike, we've put a few pillars in place that kind of frame how we approach M&A. And I kind of look at it in 3 ways: how we resource our M&A efforts, how we carry out our transactions, and then ultimately how we integrate the companies that we buy. So in terms of the resourcing piece, we have a dedicated team who works on M&A all the time as their day job. In best will in the world, if we don't have people who are dedicated to M&A, it's very hard to take people who are busy in their day-to-day role and get them to help out on a transaction. So I'm supported by a couple of people on my team in our M&A efforts, and that runs the full gambit of target identification through due diligence, negotiation, getting a transaction close, all the way to integration. So that is our bread and butter of what we do all of the time. At the same time, having the resources in place that is always focusing on M&A, it enables us to kind of look down the road of what's next. So we have more than one acquisition in the pipeline at any one stage, and we'd be at various stages of the process for each one of those. So we do build out a fairly robust pipeline. In terms of how we carry out acquisitions as well, so we're very confident in how we value businesses that we buy. We take a good view of a business up front, and the number that we put in front of a seller is generally the number we execute on. We don't chip, because we feel we are well placed to value a business up front. And another thing that we do in terms of executing, we insource as much of the due diligence as we can. And what that means is we're a lot more efficient getting it done than outsourcing the whole thing. So we have control over the process. We know what to look for in the business that we're buying. And also we know what it's like for a seller to go through a due diligence, and we can support them through the stressful experience that is. So, we've gone through it ourselves, taking in private equity investment, and we know how to support a smaller company going through the same process, which can be difficult at the best of times. And then I'd say the final piece that we do is on the integration, and we look to do the integration as quickly as possible post-transaction. And the number of reasons for that, but ultimately we feel like it's best for the people, it's best for the customers, and ultimately it's best for the company to get the integration done and get the companies consolidated efficiently after we do a transaction. But having said that, we take a fairly pragmatic approach to our integrations. So no business, and including Nostra, is best in class at everything that they do. So, we take a very collaborative approach with our sellers to identify what they do best, what Nostra does best, and ultimately we take the best of both to come up with what the combined company should operate like into the future.
I think one of the important points to make is, when we're looking for an acquisition, we're looking for, one of three things. So for us, most importantly, it's the people. We when we buy a business, we always find it has amazing people buried in the business, people who wouldn't ordinarily go out and look for a new role. So we want great people. My view is the best people who perform the best in companies are not the people who typically go out and look to change company. So when we buy a business, we get great people. And over half of our mid-management team, as an example, is made up of people who come in through acquisitions. The second thing we're looking for is geography. So we want to expand our geography. But the way I would describe that is we like to expand on the basis of we're going city by city, town by town. We want to expand. We don't want to leave an area behind. So effectively, we want to slowly go out to the next city and pick a location. So we're going into the UK at the moment. So we will pick our first city in the UK. We will then go into that city. We'll expand within that city, and then we'll go to the next closest city to us and do the same again there. MSPs today, need to realize you have to be local to your customer. A customer is somebody who pays everyone's wages, and the reality is 99% of things can be done remotely. But if you're not there, the 1%, you've a real problem. And we've had great relationships with customers who were hugely, massively far from where our head office was, and you're there for 3 years, and all of a sudden you discover that on the 14th of April, the internet went down at 9 a.m. and we didn't get somebody there till 11:45, and the customer is gone because they're going, I cannot ever have that delay again. So we build out in Ireland. We're in all the major cities at this stage. We're in Dublin, Cork, Belfast, and Galway. We'll also end up with a base somewhere in the Midlands, and then we will ultimately operate through all major cities in the UK, and that's our future plan.
You guys are now backed by private equity, correct?
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you about how that shifted your approach or strategy when it comes to what you guys do, identifying targets, structuring deals.
So what I'd say is, private equity has been brilliant for us, right? But we had done 8 deals pre-private equity, and the 2 deals that we did post-private equity, we had identified pre-private equity, if that makes sense. So we're about 1.5 years into private equity. What I would say is they bring a level of knowledge. So this is the biggest business we've ever run, right? We've I won't say all the leadership team, some of them are very experienced, but certainly for myself and my brother Barry, this is the biggest business that we have run. And what private equity does is it brings a breadth of knowledge beyond what we are used to. They're able to kind of go look at the scale you're at. We need to be thinking about, having a chief people officer. We need to be thinking about better data. The information you have, which is good and good enough as a small company, is not good enough as a big company. And when you start seeing the way they look at things, how they value things, even in terms of structuring deals, if we've done 10 deals, private equity companies might have done 150 deals and might be doing a deal a week across their portfolio. So, we typically will look at a deal, we'll look at the structure, we'll send it across, and they'll give us some great insights. Now, our private equity partners, a company called Phoenix Equity, and they're phenomenal. They're really clever people. They don't force anything on us. They give us lots of advice and insights, but they very much want us to run the business, and they want us to make decisions, and they want us to do it, but they will give us input. and their input is generally very valuable. And again, their key thing that they bring is they have that vast knowledge of expansion, of the geography, of an area, of, you know, and they're really good at challenging. I mean, if we go, we want to do something that isn't necessarily in our normal remit, with really healthy debates, and you really come out of them with a different perspective. So I think private equity at a certain scale with an organization that wants to scale. I mean, there's no point bringing on private equity unless you really want to scale. And we do, you know, we've an ambition to be Ireland's largest company, which is probably 7 billion over the next 25 years, or a long-term objective to 2050. So, you know, we want to grow, and we want to grow fast. And that's why we chose private equity, because we also wanted to you know, continue to run the business. We wanted to continue to scale it. We wanted to be on the journey. So a trade buyer was never an option for us. And we also wanted somebody who's going to back our vision. And, you know, with private equity, you go, you're going out to market, and then here's what we want to do over the next 5 or 10 years. And we want somebody to back us. And that's what we got.
Just to add to that as well, like, it's been a phenomenal experience learning more about how the art of the possible in terms of structuring transactions. You know, as Kevin said, we're coming on a lot in that way since we took on the private equity investment. And, you know, for us, it's one of the things we love to see is founders and sellers who want to be part of the journey going forward for Nostra and want to, you know, contribute and accelerate the combined company together. And what we've been able to do in terms of how we structure our transactions to incentivize them and reward that type of behavior has been really eye-opening for us.
Awesome. Well, so for the MSPs out there thinking about a sale, what kind of partners are you guys looking for at Nostra? What makes a business a good fit for your team?
So for us, I would say, look, you know, start off with the really critical and important things. We're looking for really good looking companies, right? and then they'll fit right in with us. No, so joking aside, right? So what we want is companies that, you know, there's probably 2 areas. One is the company that the owner of society wants to retire. So that's one type. The second one is a company that an owner is sitting there and he's going, look, I'd love to expand it. I don't want to do private equity. I'd like to, you know, sell my business or sell the majority of my business, and then I still want to expand, and I believe there's room for expansion, right? So somebody comes to us and says, look, you know, pick a city at random, right? So if I take I'll pick a UK city, so pick Leeds, right? Somebody says, right, I'm based in Leeds. There's 20 MSPs here. There's a great opportunity to consolidate 4 or 5 of them into one. Come to us, we would be really open and interested in how we could scale that out. The other option is somebody who just says, look, I want to exit my business. I want my team to be looked after, and I want my customers to be looked after, because that is important. I mean, the more and more MSPs I meet, it's always very personal, right? MSPs really care about their customers. A lot of them drink with their customers. A lot of them socialize with them. And the last thing they want to do is sell the business, and then the customers all get let down. And it just isn't a nice experience for anyone. So what we've been really good at doing, you know, I'd say, I think 6 of the 10 companies we bought, the CEOs have remained in our business, and still run, and a lot of them with senior positions. 2 of them are on the senior leadership team. So, you know, that's an important piece. 4 of them have retired or exited as part of the transaction. And what I would say is, for us, what we deliver for a company is we give them absolute clarity very early on. So typically in the first or second meeting, we're giving them an indicative valuation, an idea of how we would structure the deal, how we think about it. And really all we need to know from them is, do they want to be on the journey or do they want to exit? And then we can factor that in. You know, what I would love, or what I absolutely love, is when I get a LinkedIn message, and I get them reasonably regularly, from somebody saying, look, I'm thinking about it. Can we have a coffee and have a chat? And we do that either on Teams, or I'll go meet them and see what they have, see what they're doing, and ultimately try and see about expansion. So from our point of view, you know, we intend being in every major town and city in the UK and Ireland over the next kind of 4 or 5 years. And beyond that, we intend going across the water to the US, and we're going to keep going until we become Ireland's largest company.
Awesome. Well, if you were talking to, what you got like 1 minute here to answer a question in a bar, right? Or you're at a coffee or something, and somebody's an event or something, and somebody says, "Hey, man, here's where we are," and it looks like they're close, but they're not quite close. They're not quite there yet, right? What's your number one piece of advice you give them?
In terms of somebody exiting?
Yeah, just getting ready to make a transition or thinking about it, but not quite there, right?
Yeah, so I think, look, if I was to say the big thing that people don't do is they don't think about what they're actually trying to achieve, right? So I would say understand their personal objectives. The amount of people I meet and they say, I want to retire at 55 years of age, and that's what I want to do. I'm now 54, so I have 12 months to retire. And then you actually get talking to them and they're like, do you like your job? Yeah, no, I love my job. I love what I do. Okay, and how many people are in your company? Well, 40. And and what's every day like? And they go, I go in every day, I sell to customers, I absolutely love what I do. The bit I don't like is the finance bit or whatever. And I go, well, actually, so if you sell your business, so then you're going to be sitting at home all the time. And then, you're ringing people who you used to go for lunches with, and they're going, well, look, I'm busy because I've got actual work to do. And all of a sudden, you end up in an isolated scenario. I've seen that loads of times. So what I say to people is, look, decide and understand what you want yourself. And then if you want to exit and go again, understand that and be upfront about it. If you want to exit and retire, just make sure you know what retirement looks like and it's actually what you want. And if you want to sell and stay in and de-risk, which is what a lot of people want to do, then ultimately I'd say any 3 of those we can facilitate. But what I often see is people who actually retire and step down, they find retirement is not actually for them because the buzz of the deal, the buzz of winning, and 55 is so young now. So I would say to anybody, understand their actual objective, write it out, and if they do want to retire, then write out what that looks like, and then make sure they understand all the consequences of it, and then decide if that's where they want to be.
Love it. And Michael is the person who's now dealing with, you're heading up at the M&A initiative. What's you probably talk to a lot of folks about this stuff. And then what's a common theme that comes up for you that you kind of wish you could or bottle to give to everybody before they talk to you?
For us, the culture of a company is really important, and like looking at Nostra is a people business, and our people are our most valuable assets. When I try and go out and talk to businesses and kind of understand what drives them, inevitably they love their people as well, and they've done a lot to build their corporate culture. So, for us, when we go and talk to businesses, finding cultural matches is great, and it's really helpful for us. We've had really positive experience, as Kevin was touching on, of people coming in through acquisition and really flourishing in a bigger organization. So, for people who are thinking about how am I going to look after my people if I'm going to exit or if I'm going to roll into a larger company, finding the right buyer who can match up on that side is really important.
Love it. Well, great, guys. This has been awesome. How can folks get in touch with you?
Reach out on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. So both myself and Michael are on LinkedIn, or just send us an email. Our email address is also on LinkedIn, or we might even put it up as part of the podcast. I don't know if you do that, but look, for me, I love talking to other business owners, and what I say to anyone is, if they're open to having a coffee, at the very least, they might leave with a couple of mistakes that we've made that we're able to share with them, and they might not make them. And a lot of times when we sit down with companies and we look at their P&L, we're pointing things out to them about where we know by looking at them that they're missing revenue. So, and we can see underbilling in cloud revenue is a very common challenge. And without automation, that's more and more common. And a lot of MSPs are also afraid of their largest customer. And sometimes their largest customer just wants the service and it's not about the money. And MSPs are afraid to build them properly. So, for us, let's have a conversation. If we can help, we can help. If not, hopefully we can give you a couple of nuggets of information and maybe beneficial.
Well, thank you guys for being on the show, and thanks everybody for watching as usual. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, great information on this episode. Make sure to scroll down and watch the full episode over on our YouTube channel. And thanks for watching.